Welcome to the PT Marketing Power Hour, highlighting successful marketing strategies from North America's fastest growing clinics so you can learn from their wins and power your practice growth. We have another great episode today, so don't forget to hit subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, here's your host, physical therapist, marketing expert, and CEO of Practice Promotions, Neil Trickett.
Hello, and welcome to the PT Marketing Power Hour, highlighting successful strategies from North America's fastest growing clinics so you can learn from their wins and power your practice growth. I'm your host, Neil Trickett, CEO of Practice Promotions, and today's focus is how is the state of the PT and rehab industry and what does next year hold? So I'm really blessed to have Heidi Janega here, co-founder and Chief Clinical Officer of WebPT, and also co-founder of Rising Tides. Am I correct on that one? So welcome, Heidi. It's always a pleasure to have you on the podcast here.
Thanks, Neil. Always appreciative of this opportunity. And hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I am a physical therapist, been practicing in outpatient sports and orthopedics for about 15 years prior to starting a software company called WebPT, which hopefully you've heard of. We are actually going to be going into our 15th year of existence as WebPT next year. It'll be a 15-year anniversary, which is very exciting. Holding just over 50% market share in the US within the outpatient market. So it's been a really wonderful ride, lots of learning. And one of the great things that we're able to do every year is this state of rehab therapy survey that we put out. And I think we're up to at least at minimum 7,000 people that respond throughout the industry. So it's a great bit of data, and I'm really excited to dive in with you a little bit today on that.
Yeah, that's awesome. It is a really wonderful tool, and I hope if you haven't downloaded or got that yet, definitely reach out to WebPT, get that. It's a really wonderful data, great insights into the pulse of the industry, some of the challenges and things that we also have opportunities there in front of us. So great report. Make sure you get that. Heidi's a wealth of knowledge. She's done so much for the PT profession. So thank you, Heidi. I love your insight. You're always a great advocate for our profession. And yeah, thank you so much. And congratulations on the success of WebPT. Obviously, help practices every day with all of their billing and documentation and everything that system does there. So thank you so much. So let's jump in here. Let's just talk about that state of rehab report. 7,000 people participated in that. So we have a good idea in terms of what are some of the main challenges out there. So can you talk to us a little bit about, what were some of the major findings this year that were from that report?
Yeah, so one of the biggest questions that we sort of bubbled up to the top is what is the number one challenge that PTs are facing? And I'll just preface it by saying the survey was given out at the end of 2021 to 2022. So most of the data collected was early in 2022. So it's anticipation of some of the things that are going to be happening, but obviously coming out of 2021, we were still just coming out of the COVID atmosphere, but we're still dealing with some of these things today. So the number one challenge, I guess the top three things were really the work-life balance, sort of managing the employee happiness. So how do we, understand internal communication? How are we resolving concerns? Are we working to, get everybody engaged again at a level that we're pre-COVID levels? And so really just exclamation about leadership and this sort of changing of how we think about work in general, right? Perspective of, what we want out of our employer and the happiness that we want to have in the area that we spend a lot of time during the day, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and great insight. And I had to laugh because, you're saying this information was gathered just months ago, really, if you think about it, right?
Yeah.
But if you just think about this last 3 years, right, and how things have just changed so fast, right?
Yeah.
All across, one thing we're like, oh, we're out of this, but then boom, we're into something else, right? And then it was a big thing on declining reimbursements, and then all of a sudden, hey, now we're really talking hard on employee retention, right? And a lot of these things do continue on, right? But it's just been really interesting how things have rapidly evolved and changed. So, I think that's something for practice owners today, is that you have to be able to adapt and pivot and change with such a drastic changing economy, right? And healthcare landscape.
Totally. And I think this change has happened so rapidly. One of the things that we noted was that there was actually a big disconnect between leadership and the workforce, the therapist and front office staff. 30% of those that answered the survey said that they're considering a professional change because they'd like more flexibility in their work schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And then contrary to that, we have leaders who are saying almost 30% of them said that they haven't actually done anything when it comes to changing or updating or even thinking about their retention strategies overall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
that's fascinating, right? Such a difference in thinking.
such a difference,
Yeah.
right? A big gap there in terms of, and we noticed this even in anecdotally with WebPT, we had more therapists who have applied for positions in a non-clinical role with WebPT than we've ever had in the whole entire existence of our company put together.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely a lot of transition happening within our profession as a whole. And we know that, clinicians are ranking salaries as a driver for recognition, for resignations, but actually what employees or what the, workforce is saying is that they're really looking for more reasons for engagement. While obviously salary is important, we know that there's a high burden of student debt and whatnot, but it's all about this happiness that we started this conversation with, right? It's how do I be engaged? How do I feel like what I'm doing matters? And that's really incumbent on leadership to focus more on the purpose of your business, the purpose of what you're trying to do, rather than the nuts and bolts and the mechanics of how to get it done.
Yeah, I think one thing that I got a kind of a quote here from the Rehab report that I thought was fascinating is that overall employee turnover is affecting more than half of rehab therapy organizations in some capacity. However, as the organizations grow, the number increases significantly, reaching as high as 89%. So my takeaway was, like, the more bigger and complex your practice becomes, the higher that percentage is. Is that what the report was telling us?
Yep, that's essentially what we were saying, or at least the data is telling us, right? From those that answered, we know that there's a lot of burnout. We know that patient volume has soared to 20 patients per therapist per day in some practice settings, which anecdotally and also from the report, we noted that from the larger practices. And I mean, I guess it's really just it's understanding what's causing this burnout, right? And it's really, again, going back to some basic leadership principles. And when you're bigger, it's much harder to connect sometimes and to communicate, but it's empowering. If you do have multiple clinics, it's empowering those clinic leaders, clinic directors, managers, to really have those and continue to have those conversations to really build relationships with everybody on the team, to know what drives them, what motivates them, what is the most important things for them, because it's not always salary. We tend to really take the easy road sometimes and just throw dollars at it. And that's not an easy thing to do right now. We're getting squeezed in every which way from a revenue perspective, right? So I think going back to some basics, and something we've always preached, is really teaching everyone in the business how they contribute to the business, right? Where does my salary come from? How do I generate more revenue? How do I improve the efficiency? How do I, embark on something really interesting that that I love to do? For example, if you have an affinity towards marketing, how do I help with our social media? How do I help with, getting more leads in the door, getting more patients in the door, with something that I love to do that may not necessarily be only about my patient care.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree there. I always think back to when I was in practice, right? And I would sit down with my therapist and I would show them like, hey, here's the actual cost of treating a patient, your salary, everybody else's salary in here, systems, you name it, right? So they were blown away when they saw the actual like cost to get someone treated, right?
That's right.
And then they realized like, hey, there's really not much of a difference there at the end of the day, right? And so then help, like you said, I think that's a wonderful thing where you're trying to empower them into how they contribute to the company, right? Not just the patient care side of it, but how do you help the company do better? And if the company does better, you can help more people, right? And that's the way that I would always explain that too. So yeah, I think that is probably an area that is very underutilized with the staff, right? Is the training aspect and helping them understand their role from making sure the patient shows up, right? That's a biggie, right? Make sure they don't have the dropout. And then how do they help from the marketing side of things? Because there's many things they can be doing very easily to just send a friend or family member, send a colleague, and leave a review for us. Simple things like that they can participate in can make a big difference at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's just, again, getting to know especially the therapist. If you have a therapist who's really into running, for example, on their own time, how do they incorporate, a running program that now can be part of your practice? Or, they like to run marathons. How do you now engage, their whole sort of running community? How do you then bridge that gap between you and that community within your clinic? Really simple things that bring maybe some things that you do in your personal life that can actually be then brought together with your professional or clinical personality, if you will. When you really combine those together, that's when you get the full engagement of that whole person, which at the end of the day is what you really want.
Absolutely. Have you seen more clinics start to incorporate mentorship and kind of structured programs within their clinical offerings?
Yes, and also affiliations with residency programs. You mentioned Rising Tide, which I'm very proud of. Rising Tide is a scholarship program specifically for BIPOC DPT students and also residents. And as we've gone through many hundreds actually of interviews now for our scholarship program, one of the biggest things that light bulbs that's going off for me is this want for mentorship. And they feel like they don't get it in PT school. And then when they go out into the real world, they have to immediately go right into treating. And there's really not a huge opportunity, or at least they don't think there's an opportunity. It's not being offered to them with regard to this mentorship. And that is why 90% of our students that go on to residency program, that is their number one reason for going on to residency, is because they want mentorship. They, I think in one student's words, it was that they didn't want to learn by trial and error. They wanted to have the tools in their tool belt to really help their patients to their maximum ability. And they didn't necessarily feel like they could do that right out of school. And so, and I could imagine, even for a seasoned PT of, 2 to 5 years, yeah, you learn a lot, but maybe you're only learning in the area that you have been practicing in. And maybe there's other areas that you want to expand your knowledge in. And so having these mentorship programs available, and, traditionally, this has also been in the form of continuing education. But there really isn't, I don't think, the same effect as being able to treat with someone in your practice, seeing those different types of patients and then engaging back and forth versus just a weekend course or something like that.
Yeah. Now, understanding that a good chunk of our market tends to be a little bit, smaller to mid-sized clinics, right? That might have, some multiple practitioners within a single location, or sometimes a couple of locations. So,
Right.
how do they kind of approach being able to, have this kind of mentorship or just some kind of structure within that clinic in order to kind of attract people and retain people?
Great question. And it really takes some very clear intention to build a program in which you have people that your therapists who maybe are more seasoned or more specialized, who maybe have gone through residency program themselves, or, have gone on to a specialty certification, to want to be leaders in terms of a mentorship program.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's through your recruiting, it's really recruiting people that are going to want to be in. So take an inventory of what all specialties you have that are potential for mentor programs. And I'll also say that it's not just about clinical expertise. It could also be mentorship in the business side, which I think a lot of students or new grads or even, mid-level therapists are looking to, right? It's that next evolution of, I know personally, this was for me after I had been in practice for 10 years, the next logical step was like being a clinic director. And so that mentorship into leadership, that mentorship into more of the business aspects of growing a practice or understanding how the practice runs can be another alternative. And having these tracks within your practice really is about career pathing. Right. This is a career path that any new employee or employees within your practice or business has aspiration to be. So these are things that you review in your performance reviews. These are things that you offer on a quarterly basis. And then, you have to sort of put together a curriculum, right? Time that is going to be spent doing this. Maybe there is some continuing education dollars that go along with it, but it should be a structured plan and part of the career pathing benefit that you have within your practice or business.
Yeah, that's just gold right there. And I would say for a lot of practice owners that are thinking right now, oh my gosh, how am I going to do something like this? And you don't have to make it complicated, right? It doesn't have to be a huge elaborate educational program. Keep it simple, right? Like, what are some of the things that you can offer and plan out with your therapist, like on an individual basis? First, ask them, like, what are their aspirations, right? Like you said, some of them might say, hey, I'd love to know a little bit more about like the business side of things. Cool, because that could be a great clinical director down the road, right? And hey, let's do some things here. It doesn't have to be, everything at once, but hey, you can map it out with them, right? I think they would really appreciate that, and that gets them thinking down the road, like, hey, I can build here, right? And then the clinical side of things, right? Same thing. Like you can map it out, and I hope a lot of clinicians do things like, I know in our clinic, again, like one thing we would do is like every Wednesday morning for half an hour, we'd kind of like have a clinical time, right? Where we just discuss challenging, stocks on patients and things like that. And it, again, that just kind of creates that thinking of, I've got, people to work with here that we can collaborate. I'm learning, I'm growing. The CEU side of things, and making sure that when someone comes back from a CEU course, maybe they're going to have an opportunity to train the rest of the staff. It's all kinds of things you can be doing there that don't take a lot of effort, but just need a bit of structure and time at them, right?
One thing we used to do when I was a clinic director is, we would have our staff meetings either once a month or so, sometimes sooner than that, just on a rotation. Maybe even you have a 30-minute, huddle of all of your staff once a week even. And one thing we also always incorporated in there was a clinical component, just like you were saying, and anyone could bring a complicated patient to the group in which they could either ask for advice or ask questions. Or it could be a presentation on this complicated patient or a really great outcome based on doing something different than maybe they would have initially thought, right? It's something that everyone could learn from in the group. And there were so many aha moments I just remember over the years of doing this. And it also gave people an outlet and kind of a shared responsibility to then educate and help feel like they are contributing to the overall group, which I thought it always seemed to work out really well.
Yeah, I love that. And so, we're kind of addressing this whole, PT burnout question, and obviously how do I retain employees? How do I attract employees? Let's talk a little bit about this kind of notion of obviously declining reimbursements and how to handle that aspect of it. And then how have we, also the salary demands and increases there that practice owners are having to, get from clinicians. So just kind of curious from your side of things that you're seeing out there. Is there like performance-based pay? Is that like been a bigger thing happening now? Love to hear your thoughts on things like that.
Yeah, people are trying to get creative. Salary requests are going up when reimbursements are going down. Our margins are as slim as they've ever been in the last 25 plus years that I've been a PT. And it doesn't seem like there's light at the end of the tunnel, right? And so it's really first and foremost taking a step back as a clinic owner to say, okay, let me look at my business. Are there efficiencies in my business that I need to take advantage of? It's now more than ever that people really need to look at, how am I running my business? Is there fluff? Is there areas that I've just am doing things the way that I've always done it, but it's not the most efficient opportunity options to be doing it, right? So am I taking advantage of technology where I can automate things? Am I taking advantage of things in my billing practice that, I could be doing insurance verification where I could do bulk of them rather than having someone call every single insurance, right? There are many tools out there that can help automate and, dare I say, reduce the number of headcount that it's required to run your practice.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing. So now you potentially have a bigger bucket to play with, right?
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is just looking at all of your insurances. Am I maximizing my contracts with all of these insurances, right? Am I renegotiating these rates based on the outcomes that I have and knowing the quality of care and all of those things? Again, just trying to look at the top line. How do we increase the top line to help with all of these things in my business? And then from an actual employee perspective, yes, there are definitely some creativity happening on whether it's performance-based, whether it's volume-based, definitely some areas in there. But I think the most creative employers at this point, I think, are looking beyond, just as we were alluding to earlier, beyond just salary. Mm-hmm. What are the issues that are going on? A lot of it is debt, right? So student debt. Yes. So is there, rather than just paying the therapist more money, is there a way that you could work into doing some debt reduction payments? Maybe you're paying a percentage of their debt payment that they have each year or month in a way. So you're paying directly into their debt, right? Mm-hmm. Against their debt. The other thing is there ways to incentivize or engage the employee more into doing things for the business that are going to increase revenue that they all then get to benefit from? Mm-hmm. So whether that, again, like we kind of mentioned before, is there a program that can be started? And then when they start that program, a percentage of whatever increase in revenue that goes directly to that employee. It's really being creative to say, listen, I want to grow my business because I need to grow my top line revenue. How do I get everybody engaged into understanding and feeling like they're part of the ownership of this practice in a way that's going to benefit everyone? Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
And I know that people talk about long work hours and high patient volumes. And while all of those things are true, when you are engaged in something that you really love and have passion around, sometimes those extra hours don't seem like extra hours. They just feel like fun, right? Mm-hmm. Or again, that engagement factor of, oh my gosh, I'm helping, to grow this business, and I'm going to financially benefit in that return.
Yeah.
So I feel like some of the creativity around the motivation factors are what's really driving higher retention of those types of employees when it comes back to employee engagement.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. So much wisdom and insight. I love it. I think if you're not getting great ideas from that, I don't know what. But so Heidi covered so many great things there. But I think, one thing that I would love to see practice owners look at a little bit more is themselves, right? So as a practice owner, you're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur, right? You're a clinician second. So you actually have to take time away from treatment to look at the business, work with the people in your business, right? Evaluate, survey, find out, right? Only then can you work on these things that Heidi's talking about, right? So it's really critical to carve out time in your week. And I know it's tough to do, but you got to carve out time where you can actually work on your business and work on these things. Like you said, efficiency, it's huge, right? And especially in today's world, you got to, let's face it, our biggest expense is people, right? And so if we can, do more with the people that we have and they're happier and it's easier for them to do work, then that's efficiency, right? And everybody can participate in that efficiency and looking at, hey, guys, what can we do here to make this easier, right? What can we do to give more value to our patients? What more can we do to make this billing process faster, or whatever it may be? A lot of people have WebPT or tools like that they're probably not using it to its full capability, right? And so if they spent some time looking at that, there's probably processes or things they could do to make things more efficient, right? And then I love what you're saying too about top line revenue, right? So where can people contribute in the clinic to just the top line revenue? So, from a marketing standpoint, like I said, you've got a wonderful army of people that come in every single day that could be advocates for your practice. Your patients, what is your team doing to stimulate your patients, talking about your clinic, inviting others, going back and tell a doctor or leave a review for you online? There's all kinds of things you can be asking for them. Who's taking pictures in the clinic, with permission, of course, of treatments happening that can be used in marketing, right? And so that could be people contributing to that. And then making sure that you are working on good insurance contracts, know your worth, right? And this was, I remember being in practice, this was always a challenge because there were some HMOs and other companies that could give us a lot of volume, but at the end of the day, when you crunch the numbers, it's really like, I'm just going to be working more and more and more for very little money here. And so just knowing your worth and sticking to those contracts that are going to pay the best, right? And not taking the ones that are just going to, hurt you at the end of the day. So there's a lot of impact.
I know there's a lot of small practices that say, oh, I'm just a small practice and I'm just a blip on someone's radar, or maybe I'm not even a blip on someone's radar and they're never going to listen to me. That's not true. We have quite a few, a lot of clinics that have used data they've gotten out of their EMR. But more importantly, they're also, having they're referring physicians write letters on their behalf and things like that really set you apart. So your NPS score, know your net promoter score, like your patients love coming to you, right? You even have patients advocating on your behalf. And all of those sorts of things put together. And also most importantly, actually understanding and knowing and talking to others around you who, have contracts with those same insurances as to, well, what are you getting paid? Like to make sure that you're commensurate with, you just don't have an old contract that has out of date, compensation levels. Right. And so, really important to just have those data points, and they will listen. They will listen, especially if you have some sort of specialty practice that maybe no one else around you in a certain radius is really doing in their practice, because that really sets you apart.
Yeah, I had a friend and he would bring in a part-time lymphedema specialist. Made it so much easier to get on insurance contracts, right?
That's right.
And he only had to bring in a couple of lymphedema patients just to support that, but it really helped his whole practice. And I think what you said there is golden. Like you just have to try, right? And I think if you're not reevaluating your insurance contracts like every 6 months or 12 months, you're doing yourself a disservice, because you can renegotiate those. Even sometimes they'll say no, but you can keep working on it. That was one thing we did in our practice too, was like heavily renegotiate. We had the highest paying United Healthcare reimbursement in our county, just because I kept asking. And some flowers and candies didn't help, hurt either. So,
Yeah.
but it's definitely getting to know and share the value, because it was really fascinating as I talked to network managers for like Blue Cross Blue Shield and United and these people. They really didn't understand what we did and how it actually saved them a lot of money. So you have to be an advocate for not only your practice, but like the profession, and how you're actually helping impact that insurance company and saving them money. So when they start to see that, and why you're different than some of the specialty services that you can bring in, yeah, then you have some more bargaining power there.
And Neil, you mentioned training earlier, and in this area of billing, it's critically important for clinician or clinic directors or owners to be educating their staff on what contracts you have, what CPT codes each insurance company pays for and doesn't pay for. What are the maximum codes, and how do you maximize the codes that you are utilizing or time that you're spending with this particular patient? Because it does matter. We have this sort of taboo around, well, I don't want to talk about how much we get paid. It's not about how much we get paid. It's about what we do to the patient. Well, yes, you have to have great outcomes with the patient, but if you want to stay in business, you also need to get paid, right? And so understanding intimately those contracts, and then helping to educate those therapists in your practice to know, like, hey, United Healthcare pays more for therapeutic activity. If we're doing functional exercise, and here's what therapeutic activity means, if we're already doing those things and it's appropriate for the patient, then please be billing therapeutic activity and not just therapeutic exercise, right? Or neuromuscular re-education. If we're doing true balance activities, should we be billing neuromuscular re-ed? Like really educating them on the different CPT codes, what each one of those means, and how important it is to what, or translating that into what you're actually doing, can really, each little dollar here and there can add up, right? And
No doubt.
those little
Yeah.
minute changes can make a big difference overall in your top line revenue.
Oh, that's huge. Yeah. And I think again, it just comes back to like people are willing to do things if they understand the why. Right. And so if they understand, hey, we're here to help people. Number one, we're here to help people, right? But we're also a business, right? And we want to give people opportunities. I think that's one of the great words to use when you're talking to your staff. Opportunities. You want opportunities for growth. You want opportunities for, better salary, opportunities for CEO courses. Like, we can fund that if we're all properly billing for our time, and your time is valuable. You are a great therapist and you should be paid appropriately for your services, right? And we deal with this insurance world, and we have to know how to work within it. So I think if you approach it from that angle, and it's okay to have those conversations, that, like you said, it's not a dirty thing. It's actually an important thing. And I think that many practice owners don't do enough of that type of education with their team, which can make a significant difference in the way that they're billing, and obviously help them a lot with their revenue. And then these helped us at the end of the day when they're getting these kind of questions about salary, retention, all these kind of things, they have a bit more ammunition to work with, right?
Yeah. And you've talked about this on other podcasts, I know, of just knowing the metrics of your business, your pay per visit, and, your cancel no show rate, just some basic ones, right? And it's amazing what a few percentage points change in each, even in those two metrics, how that can really change what you're able to do, because you're improving your top line revenue.
Absolutely. So here's a good one, right? So I worked closely with my friend Dee Bills. She is a front office guru, right? And we actually partnered on a company called Fix Your Front Desk. And talking to so many practice owners there, practice owners thought that 85% of their patients showing up was normal, right? And I was like, what? Right. So if you should be getting about, over 92% of your people showing up for their scheduled appointment, right? Or reschedule, or however it works out there. But, if you have 5% cancellation rate, you're rocking it, right? But if you have a 15% cancellation rate, wow, that's not normal, right? And so just there's a huge amount of opportunity on the front desk, just in controlling the schedule, right? And making sure people show up for their appointments. And that's where too, like therapists, if they're trained well, can really be supporting the front desk and making sure, Mrs. Jones shows up for her appointment as scheduled, or we get her back on the books if she couldn't get it that day. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's lots of opportunities like that.
That's also where technology can come in with, call reminders and
Yep.
patient retention management technology to keep in contact, build that build that loyalty with patients so that, they do feel value in what they're doing. And it's no different than actually your employee experience. It's just now what we call the patient experience, right? You want that same sort of engagement in their own journey through their plan of care with you in the practice.
Yeah, it's all about those touch points, right? And again, leveraging the technology that's there. In your EMR, there's a lot of technology that can be used to make sure that patient experience is going along. A lot of touch points. If you've never checked out WebPT Reach, it's a great software there. Email reminders and texts that go out, and so it keeps that patient experience humming along. With again, you've talked about this many times, Heidi, where the patient dropout is a huge problem, right? So when we're talking about top line revenue, that's a place to really work hard and fix things.
Yeah. And when we talk about dropout, that means that they're not finishing their full plan of care, right? So, and whether or not they've gotten better or not is irrelevant, because you have lost the opportunity to, on that last visit, to engage with them, to, share about other programs you might have in your practice, or, figure out, is there a family member, or even ask them to put a great review on Yelp, or, whatever social media platform that you're utilizing. So it's really just having that opportunity to really communicate, and hopefully they haven't left you to go somewhere else.
So, quick question here, just kind of your opinion on this, but like if, we're having this notion that like PTs are burnout, right? And so if they're having patients drop off their schedule or say, hey, I don't need to come back in, do you think that contributes to the PT burnout? Like they have a sense of failure sometimes if patients aren't keep coming like they're supposed to?
Yeah, I mean, it's chicken or egg, right? Is it the patient doesn't return because they're not having a great experience because the therapist is burnout and appears to not really care, or is it the patient's not improving? They don't feel like they have the skills in their toolbox to help this patient, and so they drop off, right? It's, I don't know which comes first kind of thing. It could be a combination of both, most likely. So I mean, it just goes back to all the things we were talking about, having open communication with another therapist in the clinic to say, hey, this patient isn't improving. Is there something I'm missing? Right. That mentorship kind of component. Right. But then on the, patient side, having opportunity, whether it's through, engagement surveys, or just having that open dialogue with the clinician, with their provider, to say, hey, things, I don't feel like I'm improving, or maybe this isn't the right fit. Or maybe there's a billing problem I'm really angry about. I mean, we know from plenty of evidence and from my own clinical experience as a clinic director, man, you could have the best clinical experience with a patient and something goes wrong with their billing and somehow you're dead to them, right?
Yeah.
And so
money's a touchy subject.
That combination of open dialogue, both in the front office and also on the clinical side, it just kind of has to all be humming. And you're going to lose patients, right? I mean, sometimes but you got to know the reasons, right? You got to understand the reasons so that you can make, in effect, change. And if you don't have a way to connect and get that feedback loop going, then that's where you kind of just are flying a little bit blind and not being able to improve those areas that maybe you could actually improve on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've all had those clinicians that are just amazing. Like they're just humming along and everybody show up pretty much and they're just fantastic. Everybody loves them, right? And then you have other clinicians that kind of struggle, right? And people have a lot more no-shows and cancellations and things like that. And so I think it's really important in your clinic to really, like you said, pair up those people and see what they can learn from each other. I think just kind of helping a clinician understand that they do wear multiple hats, right? So it's not just the clinical hat, but their job is actually to sell the patient. And most PTs don't know that they should be selling, right? But they do it all day long, right? You're selling the patient on their plan of care, right? And you're selling them on why you're doing this particular technique, right? Or why you're evaluating them this way, or why they need to come in 3 times a week, So it's this constant sales process. And so you have some people that are naturally just a little bit better communicative, and they're a little bit better at selling and talking to people, and then others that struggle a little bit. So sometimes just kind of helping those folks that do struggle a little bit, just with some scripts or some things that they could be saying, and actually the purpose, like, why do we need this person to come in? I actually had a clinic that I knew, and they mostly got people in 1 time a week, and I was thinking, what, right? Why, right? Why? And the way I told my therapist was like, if there was no insurance needed, and you could see the patient as many times as you wanted to, how many times would you see him in a week? And they just like, if I can see him every day, I get him better real fast. Sure, right, yeah. So why are you accepting the insurance company telling you twice or once a week? Right? Bottom line is, what needs to get done to get that patient better. So again, it comes back to good control for the therapist on these different aspects of marketing, sales, clinical experience, right?
Yeah, and Neil, I'll just challenge you a little bit on that. I think that's the notion that if we could get our hands on them every single day, that they somehow would be getting better faster. And I'm not saying that that's not true. I'm saying we need more evidence to help prove our case.
Mm-hmm.
We have too many anecdotal hypotheses that say that. We do know from evidence through this last couple of years that actually the combination, it doesn't have to be that you see the patient in person and put your hands on them.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things that can be improved, because a lot of the progress comes from what the patient does outside of the practice with their home exercise program, and continued on with their, strength and flexibility with things that they do on their own. And so, the combination hybrid model of both in person in combination with some remote visits is actually showing to be very engaging for the patient, and also getting the same outcomes if they would have had all of those visits in person. So the only reason I challenge you on that is this, because we need to let the data help us really create the path for what the future of this industry is going to be, because it's never going to be that we can see the patient 5 days a week. That's just not feasible and costly for the insurance company. And we know that. We have to be able to work hand in hand with what's going to provide the best outcome in perhaps the fewest number of visits, to be honest. And so we need to figure out how that combination works moving forward. And I think more and more practices are starting to adopt this methodology, because it's also what patients want. They don't want to drive to see you every day, no matter how awesome you are. Some patients love it, but the majority of them don't have to. It takes time away from work. Takes time away from their families. They just don't have the ability, cost, gas prices are going up, all of the reasons that they tell you that they can't show up today. So why not see them in a remote fashion, right? And this is where RTM, the remote therapeutic monitoring codes, are going to be coming in. We do have the ability to now get reimbursed for RTM. And so that's another kind of component that I think in this next sort of phase of our industry progression is going to be of where we really see this hybrid sort of model coming out and playing out to be very important in how we change our practice.
I agree 100%. Yeah, I think the hybrid model is definitely kind of the wave of the future for most patients, right? How that's going to work out. But so coming back to what we were talking about though, was that just the notion of that, whether it's remote, whether it's in person, that your services are needed, right, to help get the patient better, right? So you might be taking, remote, updating the home exercise program, having a remote session with them, whatever it may be. That hybrid model is definitely the way it goes. But again, just making sure that PTs know that they're an integral part of that patient getting the optimum outcome.
Yes, and I am just going to put a plug in at this moment. Fresh off of private practice section conference last week, I went to a presentation from Larry Benz of Confluent Health.
Mhm.
And they've been doing a pilot over the last 3 years as a self-insured employer on actually putting PT first into their employee benefit package. And this is, I think, the second or third time he's come back to speak about this, because it's been in different phases and what they've learned moving from, the previous year. And I mean, the biggest thing is to your point of knowing our value and knowing that what we do is valuable to patients. We haven't, as an industry, really put our money where our mouth is, and we have a really significant opportunity right now to do that. And I would just challenge all of the clinic owners out there. You all provide benefits for your employees. Even if it's 3 employees in your practice, you provide benefits. And I would just challenge each and every one to talk to your benefits provider to try to incorporate and incentivize going to PT first, whether it's PT, the first 3 visits of PT are, copay free, or something, to where your employees should be living what you are preaching every single day. And most of us are not doing that. And so what better way to promote the value and live your purpose, right? And what you're preaching every day. But secondly, it's also going to empower us with more data to insurance companies. If more patients are getting these benefits of PT first, and we can truly show the downstream cost decreasing because of what we're doing as a profession, it's only going to elevate us in what we're able to do as a whole. Because at the end of the day, money and data is what speaks to insurance companies. And right now, we don't have enough of it, and we're not fully taking advantage of direct access, and we're not fully taking advantage of our ability to change our own benefit package plans within our clinics and our companies.
Love it. What a fascinating idea. I love that concept. Love it. So let's do it. Let's push that. So Heidi, wonderful insights today. Thank you so much. What final thoughts do you have for our audience here? What some of the things that they could just really put their focus on for the next year?
I will just say, with the economy where it is, it's going to be a little bit tough in the early stages of 2023. As far as, when the economy and people are tight with their wallets, it always affects us as a profession a little bit, because it's usually in what we talked about, the length of their plans of care may be shortened, or, they just struggle with having to pay their copay or their deductible, especially at the beginning of the year. So just be prepared for that. That's first and foremost. Second is that we have had a lot of therapists leave the industry, and I'm sure many of you are struggling perhaps right now who have open recs for a PT, or you just can't seem to find a PT who wants to work full time without getting paid as full time right now. It's a dilemma that is not unique to you. It's happening all across the country. And so I hope that you listen to some of the things we talked about throughout this program, because it is really about getting more creative now in providing more flexibility with schedules, engagement with the practice, and also just leadership opportunities. And I don't just mean management of people, but leadership in terms of ideas and taking on small projects within the, excuse me, within the practice that allows them to feel ownership in what they're doing. And so I guess those would be my only final words of advice outside of don't give up hope. We add so much value, and with a lot of what's happening outside of our industry, with what our perceived competitors, with the Hinges of the world, all that is doing, and in our perspective, is amplifying the need for physical therapy. We know that nothing is going to replace us in terms of our hands-on skills and the knowledge that we get through our PT program. So put those in action, be vocal, be an advocate for yourself, your clinic, but also for the profession. Be involved with the PT PAC. Be involved with, advocacy in your local area and your association. It is all super meaningful to the overall future of our profession.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Heidi. It's been a pleasure having you on here. And I think one kind of takeaway that I have from the report is that as far as looking as optimism, yes, there's a lot of challenges right now, but actually a lot of PTs are very optimistic about where the future lies here. So that's great, great data to see that there is still a lot of optimism in our industry. And I think, again, the things that we talked about here today, there's a lot of great things that you can really look to improve within your clinic and improve the experience of your therapist, which is going to help with retention and lots of things that you can do to improve your top line revenue and just give more opportunities for 2023. So thank you, Heidi. Great having you on here. And
Absolutely. Neil, thank you so much again for this opportunity. We'll provide all the links to anything we've talked about today, so you can share out with your audience as you see fit.
Absolutely. Thank you, Heidi. Great having you on here.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks again for joining us today. Be sure to check out practicepromotions.net/power. There, listeners can download over 9 checklists and free resources made to coach you through simple, proven marketing actions to increase new patients. So check it out today. That's practicepromotions.net/power, and I'll see you next time.